I have a pouch of broken things at my belt, and my father has never once told me to throw them away. Khmer Empire in the shadow of Angkor. The year is deep in the reign of Suryavarman II, when the temple has already taken longer to build than I have been alive. The pouch holds chisel tips, a dozen of them now, maybe more. Each one snapped clean on some stubborn edge of stone that would not give the way yesterday's stone gave. My father breaks 2, sometimes 3, in a single morning when the sandstone runs hard through its grain. He hands them to me without looking, and I put them in the pouch instead of the discard pile. Neither of us has ever talked about why. Our workshop sits close enough to the western gallery that stone dust settles on everything by midday. Our food, our hair, the cloth stretched over the water jars. My brother Sina says he can taste the temple in his tea now. He says it like a joke. I sharpen the good tools before dawn, while the light is still gray. Sina sharpens beside me, slower than he used to, his bad leg tucked under the bench where it won't have to hold his weight. Neither of us talks about that either. By the time my father wakes, the tools are ready, and the broken ones are already resting in my pouch, waiting for whatever it is I keep them for. Before I go on, you're listening to I Was There, the channel that remembers the bakers, the farmers, the water carriers, the people who woke before sunrise and died forgotten. Their lives matter. We remember them. Where are you listening from tonight? I love knowing where these stories travel. If you've made it this far, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you are. And if you enjoy peaceful journeys into the past, consider subscribing so we can meet here again. The tools are lined up by the time the sky turns from black to gray. I count them the way my father taught me. Chisels first, by size, then the mallets, then the finer picks last, because those go dull fastest and need checking twice. Sina watches me count. He always watches these mornings, since his leg stopped him from walking to the rafts with the others. You missed one, he says. I haven't. I never miss one. But I check anyway, because that's the game we play now. And finding nothing wrong is its own small kind of proof that the morning is starting right. My mother is at the fire, and the smell of rice competes with the smell of stone dust, the way it does every morning in this house. She hands me a bowl without asking if I'm hungry. I am always hungry before dawn. Everyone in this house is. Your father says the West Gallery stone is running hard again, she says. Not a question. She has heard him say it 3 times this week already. The way he says things he wants to be less true than they are. I eat standing, the way I always eat, and I watch my father check his own tools even though I've already checked them. He doesn't trust anyone's count but his own, not even mine, though he never says so out loud. He just checks, quiet, and nods when he's satisfied, and that nod is the only thing that tells me I did it right. Kiri. He says my name like he's testing whether I'm listening. Bring the pouch today. I want to look at what we've kept. I don't ask why. I never ask why with him. I just get the pouch from where it hangs by my sleeping mat and tie it to my belt. The broken chisel tips shifting inside with a small sound like teeth. Outside, the street between our workshop and the next one is already busy. A woman calls out that she has no more rice to sell until the afternoon delivery. And the man she's telling this to argues the same argument he makes most mornings. And neither of them seems to expect it to end any differently today than it did yesterday. Sina sits by the doorway, sharpening what's left to sharpen. He used to walk to the quarry rafts with the older boys. Now he sits and sharpens and calls out corrections to my counting that are never actually corrections, just his way of still being part of the morning work. Bring me back something, he says, the way he says it most mornings. Bring you what? I don't know yet. You'll know it when you see it. This is also a game we play. I have never once brought him anything. He has never once told me what he wanted. But he asks anyway every morning, and I say I'll try every morning. And something in the asking and the trying seems to matter more than whatever the actual thing would be. My father shoulders the heavier tool bag. He doesn't say ready, the way some fathers might. He just steps toward the door, and that's how I know it's time. The workshop, when I look back at it from the street, looks like it always looks: small, dust-covered, ordinary. But somewhere inside those four walls is every tool that has ever cut into that temple. And somewhere on my belt is every piece of one that stopped. The road to the temple runs past 6 other workshops before it reaches the Causeway, and I know every one of them by sound before I see them. The rope maker's frame creaks first. Then the sound of someone testing a drum skin over and over, never quite happy with the pitch. Then, closest to the water, the low talk of the men who load the rafts. My father walks fast in the mornings. Not because he's late, we're never late, but because he likes to be the first at the gallery, before the dust from other crews starts drifting into the air he has to breathe all day. I match his pace without being told to. This is something I learned early. Match his pace. Carry what he hands you. Don't ask questions he hasn't finished thinking about yet. The causeway crosses the moat, and this is the part of the walk I like best, though I couldn't say exactly why. The water sits flat and quiet most mornings, holding the sky in it before the sun climbs high enough to break the reflection apart. Sometimes there's mist low over the surface, and the western towers rise up out of it like they're the only solid things left in the world. Rivers low, my father says, not to me exactly, more to the water itself. He says this most mornings when it's true, the way another man might comment on the weather. I understand what it means without him explaining. Low river means the quarry rafts run slower this week, means fewer new blocks arriving at the unloading stones by the south wall, means the men who load and unload have less to do, and more time to stand around arguing about whose turn it is to check the ropes. It doesn't mean less work for us. Stone that's already arrived still needs shaping, still needs carving, still needs the small correction after correction that turns a rough block into a smooth wall. But it means the whole rhythm of the place shifts a little, the way it always shifts when the river runs high or low, season to season. My father worked here before the Western Gallery had any carving on it at all, just raw stone, freshly set, waiting. He doesn't talk about those years much. What he does say, sometimes, without meaning to make it sound like anything important, is that stone waits better than people do. People get restless watching something take shape slowly. Stone doesn't mind. Stone has never once complained about how long anything takes. We pass the overseer's post before we reach our own gallery. Pathu sits there most mornings with a tally stick, counting rafts as they land, out loud, even when there's no one nearby to hear him count. 14, he says to nobody as we walk past, though I didn't see any raft arrive just now. Maybe he's counting yesterday's total again, just to be sure of it. My father nods to him. Pathu nods back without breaking his count. He'll count that stick into splinters, my father says, once we're past him, not unkindly. It's the closest thing to a joke my father tells most mornings. Further along, near the south quarters, a group of carvers from a different gallery are already at work, and the sound of their chisels reaches us before we can see them. A rhythm of small taps, uneven, dozens of hands working at slightly different speeds, none of them keeping time with each other on purpose, all of them somehow not clashing either. I've always liked that sound. It doesn't sound like work from a distance. It sounds more like rain. If rain could choose to fall a little harder in some places than others. My father stops at the water trough near our gallery's entrance, the one the workshop keeps filled for anyone passing, and drinks without hurrying. The same 3 long swallows he always takes before starting. Then He looks at me, really looks, the way he does maybe once or twice a morning, and glances at the pouch on my belt. Still carrying it, he says. Not a question. You told me to bring it. I did. He doesn't explain further. He picks up his bag again, and I follow him toward the gallery entrance, past the low mist still clinging to the moat behind us, past Pathu's counting, past the uneven rain sound of other men's chisels, toward the wall that has been waiting, patient as stone always is, for us to arrive and give it one more day's worth of shape. The gallery smells like dust and wet stone, always, no matter the season. My father says a wall gives off a different smell depending on how fresh the cut is. New stone smells almost sweet, faintly, like something buried. Older stone, already fitted and settled, smells like nothing at all. Today's section is new. A block set 2 days ago, waiting for its face to be shaped. My father runs his palm across it before he touches a single tool to it. He does this every time, on every new block. And I used to think it was just habit, until I noticed he does it slower on the blocks that will carry a face, an apsara, a god, something with an expression that has to be right the first time, because there is no undoing stone once it's been taken away. Chisels, he says. I hand them over in the order he'll need them, largest first. This is the part of the morning where neither of us talks much. He works, and I watch, and I hand him what comes next before he has to ask for it, because I've watched him enough mornings now to know the order without thinking about it. The block doesn't want to cooperate today. I can tell by the sound, a duller strike than usual, more resistance, the kind of grain that fights the chisel instead of parting for it. My father doesn't say anything about it, but I see him adjust his angle twice, then a third time, before he finds the line the stone will actually allow. Harder than yesterday's, I say, because it seems true, and he hasn't said it himself. Every block is harder than yesterday's, until it isn't. He doesn't look up when he says this. Then you forget it was ever hard at all. I think about this while I sharpen the chisel he set aside. It doesn't feel like an answer exactly, but it settles somewhere in me anyway. The way things he says sometimes do, not understood right away, just kept, the way I keep the broken tips. Another block, further down the wall, is being fitted by 2 men I know by sight, but not well, Boren and his younger brother, whose name I've never learned because he's quiet and doesn't get introduced much. They're setting a new stone into place. No mortar, just the joint itself, cut so precisely that the block only fits one way. And once it's seated, it isn't going anywhere without being carved back out. I've watched this fitting happen dozens of times, and it still looks like something close to impossible. Two rough shapes, tested against each other, adjusted, tested again, until they lock. How do you know it's right? I ask my father, nodding toward Bourne's block. You don't until it holds. Then you know. This is also not quite an answer. But I've stopped expecting answers that are simple. Everything here seems to work this way. You do the thing. And only afterward does it tell you whether it was right. Near midday, my father stops to check the pouch. He doesn't ask for it. He just reaches over, opens the drawstring, and looks inside at the dozen broken tips resting together. This one, he says, lifting one out, a shorter piece. The tip snapped at an angle. This is from the second week we worked this gallery. I don't ask how he remembers that. He remembers things about stone the way other people remember faces. Why do you want to look at them? I finally ask. It's the closest I've come to asking the real question. Why keep any of them at all? He turns the broken piece over once in his fingers, then sets it back in the pouch without answering directly. Not today, he says instead, which isn't a refusal exactly. It's more like a door he's leaving unlocked for later. We eat where we work, flatbread, a little dried fish, water from the trough we passed this morning. And the gallery around us keeps making its uneven rain sound, chisels striking at their own separate rhythms, the wall slowly gaining a shoulder here, a fold of cloth there, the beginning of a face 2 sections down that won't be finished for weeks. Yet, I watch my father's hands more than I watch the wall. His hands know things his mouth doesn't say. When the afternoon starts, we'll keep going, one strike at a time. And somewhere in all these small strikes, days apart, weeks apart, a face will eventually appear that no single strike could have made on its own. By afternoon, the heat sits differently in the air, heavier, closer to the ground, and my father sends me to the unloading stones with a message for the overseer there. Something about a chisel size for tomorrow's block that needs confirming before the smith closes his fire for the day. I don't mind these errands. They get me away from the gallery's rhythm for a while, into a different one entirely. The unloading stones sit where the canal widens near the south wall, and this is where the Quarry rafts come in when the river allows it. Today, there are only 2 rafts tied up, not the 6 or 7 I've seen on better weeks. My father was right about the river. Low water, slow week. Men stand around with less to do than usual, which means more talking than usual. A group near the ropes are arguing, not seriously. The kind of argument that's really just a way to pass time. whether the low river will hold through next month or turn worse before it turns better. Nobody seems to actually know. Everybody has an opinion anyway. I find the overseer near the smaller raft, checking a stone against a measuring cord. My father says the west gallery needs the narrow chisels tomorrow, not the wide ones, I tell him. The stones fighting the wide edge. He nods without looking up. Tell him I heard. Then, after a pause, like he's remembered something, tell him also the smith's low on iron till the next delivery. Tools go dull, they go dull. Nothing to be done about it till the rafts pick up. I say I'll tell him, and I mean to leave, but I find myself staying a moment longer, watching the men work the stone off the raft. It takes 4 of them, ropes, and a plank, careful coordination that doesn't look careful from a distance. It looks almost clumsy, men shouting instructions over each other. But the stone comes off steady, inch by inch, and settles onto the bank without anyone getting hurt or the block cracking. I've walked past this spot most of my life and never once stopped to watch the actual moment a stone arrives. It's always just been a fact. Stone comes from the quarry. Stone reaches the gallery. Stone becomes a wall. I've never thought about all the separate hands and ropes and shouted instructions between one end of that and the other. An old woman sits near the bank, selling rice wrapped in leaves to the raft workers. And she catches me watching the unloading longer than an errand should take. First time you've really looked, she asks, not unkindly. I don't know, I say, which is true. I've looked before. I don't think I've seen it before, not the way I'm seeing it now. She laughs, just a little, and goes back to her rice. And I think about what she said the rest of the walk back. Not because it was a big thing to say, but because it's sitting in me the way my father's comments sit in me. Something I'll probably still be turning over tomorrow. On the way back, I take the longer path along the outer wall, where the afternoon sun comes in low and orange across the western face of the temple. This is the direction my father says he wants to see the sun set through one day. Not just any sunset, but the one where it lines up exactly with the causeway, straight through the main gate. He's mentioned it twice, both times like it wasn't really something he expected to say out loud. I don't fully understand why that particular sunset matters more than any other, but I've started noticing, since he first mentioned it, how the light moves a little differently each week against that western face. Closer to the gate some days, further some days, shifting with the season the way the river shifts. Back at the gallery, my father takes the message about the chisels and the iron without much reaction. This is the kind of small trouble that happens most weeks. Nothing worth spending worry on. He keeps working the block's shoulder, patient with the dull edge he already has. Iron's short, I tell him again, in case he didn't hear the first time. It'll come when it comes. He doesn't stop working. Stone doesn't mind waiting either way. I sit back down beside the tools and start sharpening what I can, thinking about the rice seller's question, about the stone I watched come off the raft steadier than I expected, about my father's sunset that hasn't happened yet and might not happen for years. The pouch sits against my hip, same as always, the broken pieces inside it shifting a little every time I move. My father decides, without much explanation, that I should go with the next raft crew upriver toward the quarry landing. Not the whole distance to Killen Hills itself, but far enough to meet the incoming rafts partway and help bring back whatever the low water has allowed through. Pathu needs an extra hand for the counting, and my father says it will do me good to see where the stone starts before it becomes a wall. I've never gone this far along the canal before. The workshop, the gallery, the unloading stones, these are the edges of the world I know. Past them, the water narrows, and the trees close and closer on both banks, and the sound of the worksite fades until all that's left is water against the raft, and the occasional call of a bird I don't recognize. Pathu talks the whole way, mostly to himself, mostly numbers. How many rafts came through last month? How many are expected once the rains pick up? How the count never quite matches what the overseers upriver report, and how that gap between two counts of the same thing has bothered him for 11 years now. I don't say much back. I don't think he needs me to. The river runs low enough in places that the raft crew has to pole carefully, avoiding sandbars I wouldn't have noticed on my own. One of the older men, a raft puller named Che, points them out to me as we pass. A darker patch of water here, a ripple pattern there. Small signs that mean something to him and meant nothing to me an hour ago. You learn the river the way your father learned the stone, he says, when I ask how he knows where the shallow parts hide. Badly, at first. Then all at once, one day, you just know. This sounds like something my father would say, in different words, about a different thing. And I think about how many people around this temple seem to have learned their own version of the same lesson. By mid-afternoon, we reach the meeting point, where the quarry's own rafts come down to trade their load partway. So the return trip splits the distance for both crews. There are more men here than I expected. Carvers and porters and haulers I've never seen before. All working the same temple from a direction I never think about. The direction the stone comes from instead of where it ends up. A boy near my own age is helping guide one of the quarry rafts in, and we end up standing near each other while the men argue, good-naturedly, about whose knot is holding better on the ropes. His name is Ang, and his father cuts stone at the quarry itself, has never once seen the temple it becomes. Never, I ask, because this seems strange to me, the way I suppose it might seem strange to him that I've never seen the quarry before today. He says there's no time, Ang says. Cutting keeps him there. Somebody else's job to bring it the rest of the way. I think about this the whole time we're loading the raft. That Ang's father shapes the very beginning of something he will never see finished. The way my father shapes the middle of something he might not live to see completed either. Neither end knows the whole shape. Only the stone, maybe, if stone could know anything. The load today is smaller than usual, 3 blocks only. The river too low for more, and Che mutters that this is the way it's been all season. A little less each week, the current pulling back like it's saving itself for later. I don't understand rivers well enough to know if this is worry or just observation. He doesn't say it like worry. He says it the way my father says things about stone that fight the chisel, noticing, not fearing. On the way back, Pathu counts the 3 blocks twice, out loud, satisfied both times with the same number, and I sit near the edge of the raft and watch the banks slide past slower than they did on the way up, the current working against us, now instead of with us. I think about the pouch at my belt, and about Ang's father, who has never seen the temple, and about how strange it is that so many hands touch one wall without any single person seeing the whole of it. Not my father, not Ang's father, not even Suryavarman himself, most likely, who will probably not live to see every gallery finished either. The river carries us back slowly, the sun dropping lower, and somewhere behind us, the quarry keeps cutting stone that will arrive here long after today, long after this particular low season. Stone that people not yet born will walk past without knowing any of our names. We meet the shore crew back at the unloading stones as the light starts turning gold instead of white. And my father is there waiting, done with his own work for the day, standing at the edge of the causeway the way he sometimes does before we walk home together. 3 blocks, Pathu tells him, before I can say anything. River's stingy this week. My father nods like this is neither good news nor bad, just weather. He falls into step beside me, and we start the walk back along the outer wall, the same path I took yesterday afternoon, except now the sun sits lower, and the light comes in almost level across the stone. This is when it happens. The thing he's mentioned twice before, though only partway, only a little of it. The sun, dropping toward the tree line, lines itself up for just a few minutes with the western gate, so that the light runs straight down the causeway, through the gate, and touches the base of the towers beyond. It isn't the full alignment he's waiting for. He's told me before that the real one, the one he wants, happens only certain times of year. And even then, only if the sky stays clear enough to see it. But it's close enough that he stops walking to watch it. I stop too. Neither of us says anything for a while. The workers heading home behind us go quiet as they pass this stretch, the way people do when they walk into something without meaning to interrupt it. Not the day, my father finally says, but close. How will you know when it's the real one? I'll know. He starts walking again. The whole gate will hold the light, not just the edge of it. I think about how many evenings he must have watched this, waiting for the one where it lines up exactly, and how he's never once complained about the ones that were only close. Sina is waiting at the workshop door when we get back, a small wooden shape in his hands, something he's been carving for one of the worksite children, a crude little ox, the kind of thing that wouldn't survive a careful look, but will survive a 5-year-old's enthusiasm just fine. Kiri went upriver today, my father tells him, setting down his bag. Without me, Sina says, but he says it lightly, the way he says most things about the things he can't do anymore. I tell him about Ang, about the Quarry meeting point, about the boy whose father has never seen the temple his stone becomes. Sina listens the way he listens to everything now, carefully, like he's storing it somewhere for later, the way I store the broken chisel tips. That's a strange kind of work, he says. Making something you'll never see finished. You're doing it too, I say, before I've fully thought about it. The toys. You won't see most of those kids grow up either. He looks at the little wooden ox in his hands for a moment, like he hadn't thought about it that way. That's different, he says, but he doesn't say how. My mother calls us in for the evening meal, and the workshop settles into the sounds it makes at the end of every day. Bowls, the fire, my father setting his tools down in their exact places, the pouch coming off my belt and onto the shelf where it rests each night, the broken pieces inside it quiet now instead of shifting. I catch my father looking at the pouch once, briefly, while my mother serves the rice. He doesn't say anything about it, but it's the second time today he's looked at it, like he's getting ready to say something he hasn't said yet. Outside, the light finishes fatting off the western gate, and the ordinary evening sounds of the street, someone's fire being fed, someone's child being called in, a dog somewhere that barks twice and then stops. Settle in around the temple the way they do every single evening, whether or not the light lined up the way my father wanted it to. The lamps are low by the time my father finally opens the pouch again, this time without me handing it to him, this time on purpose, at the small table where we usually only set food. Outside, the street has gone quiet the way it does most nights. A few voices still drifting from open doorways. Someone's fire crackling down to embers. The temple itself dark now, except for whatever moon there is to catch its outline against the sky. My father spreads the broken tips out across the table, one at a time, careful, like he's counting them the way Pathu counts rafts. You remember why I asked for this today, he says. I do. I've thought about little else since this morning, though I've stopped expecting him to explain anything quickly. Every one of these failed, he says, snapped on stone that wouldn't give the way it should have. He turns one over in his fingers, the same short piece from the second week of this gallery, the one he named without hesitating days ago. A careless man throws these away and forgets they existed. He sets it down and picks up another. But nothing here is wasted. Not the stone that chips wrong. Not the tool that breaks. He nods toward the smith's direction, somewhere across the dark street. These go back to him, melted down, reshaped, made into new tools that cut new stone. The temple doesn't just use up iron, it keeps it moving. Broken becomes new. New breaks again eventually. It keeps going, the same iron, over and over, longer than any one tool, longer than any one carver. I look at the pile of tips on the table, and for the first time I understand, not fully, not all at once, the way Che described learning the river, but enough. Why my father never told me to throw them away. You knew this, I say, since the beginning. Why did you let me keep guessing? Because you had to notice it yourself, or it wouldn't have meant anything. He starts gathering the tips back into the pouch, unhurried. I could have told you the first week. It would have been words. This way, it's something you carried. Sina listens from where he sits by the doorway, still working at his little wooden ox, the knife moving slow and even in the lamplight. Same as the toys, he says quietly, mostly to himself. My father glances at him, and something passes between them that I don't fully catch. Something old, maybe, from before I was old enough to notice these things passing. The gallery won't be finished in my lifetime, my father says, turning back to me. Maybe not in yours either. I used to think that was the hard part to accept. Now, I think it was never the point. The wall doesn't need me to see the end of it. It needs me to do today's stone well, and tomorrow's, and let the ones who come after do theirs. I think about Ang's father at the quarry, cutting stone he'll never see become a wall. I think about the boy who guided the raft in, who might spend his whole life on that river without ever standing where I stood today. I think about Suryavarman himself, who ordered all of this built, and who, the way things are going, likely won't live to see the western gate hold the sun exactly the way my father wants it to. None of them will see the whole of it. None of us will. And somehow, watching my father tie the pouch back onto my belt himself, for the first time, I don't feel the weight of that the way I thought I might. Sleep, he says, the way he says it most nights. No ceremony to it. Tomorrow's stone won't wait for us to be tired. I lie down near the wall, the pouch resting where it always rests, and I listen to Sina's knife slow and stop, and my father's breathing even out across the room. And somewhere out past our street, past the dark shape of the temple against the sky, the river keeps moving the way it has all week, low, patient, carrying tomorrow's stone toward us a little at a time, whether or not any of us are awake to notice it arrive. The rains came properly not long after that night at the table, and with them, the river rose enough that the rafts started running full again, 6, then 7 a week, more blocks arriving than we've had in a season. My father says this happens most years, the low water, and then the return of it, though he says it now the way he says most things about stone. Not like a complaint, just a fact the world keeps proving true again. The smith got his iron delivery, finally. My father took the pouch to him himself, the whole dozen tips, and stood there while the old broken pieces went into the fire and came out again reshaped, new chisels, new picks, nothing wasted, exactly as he said. I watched the metal glow and soften and take a new edge, and I understood, the way you understand something with your eyes instead of your ears, that this was the last time that particular pouch of broken things would exist as broken things. He gave 2 of the new tools back to me. Yours now, he said. Sharpen them the way you sharpen everything else. I have started my own pouch since then. Smaller than his, still. It will take me longer to fill it than it took him, because I break fewer tools than he does. Not because I'm careful, he tells me, but because I haven't yet reached the stone that will teach me to be careless in the right way. The way that comes from actually trying something difficult instead of only handing tools to someone who does. Sina finished the little wooden ox and gave it to the smith's youngest daughter, who carries it everywhere now, worn smooth at the edges, all ready from her hands. He started on a second one. He says he might make enough, eventually, for every child on this street. though he says it the way he says most of his plans now, quietly, like it's not a big thing, even though I think it might be. Tonight, after the evening meal, my father takes one of the old chisel tips, not from the smith's fire, but one he kept back, the very first one. The short piece snapped at an angle from the second week of this gallery, and walks it over to the loose floor timber near the workshop door, the one that's creaked under everyone's feet for as long as I can remember. He kneels, works the timber up just enough, and presses the broken tip into the gap beneath it, then sets the board back down over it. Why that one, I ask. Because it was the first one you kept. He stands, brushing dust from his knees. Nobody will ever know it's there. It'll hold that timber steady for years, probably longer than either of us. Nobody walking over it will think about what's underneath. Doesn't that bother you? That no one will know? It didn't bother the men who cut the first stone for that western gallery, he says. They knew they wouldn't see it finished. They cut it well anyway. He looks toward the door, toward the dark shape of the temple somewhere past our street. The wall doesn't need to be seen being built. It only needs to be built well. I think about Aang's father at the quarry. I think about the boy on the raft who might spend his whole life on that river. I think about my own 2 new tools, waiting to be broken in on stone that hasn't arrived yet. Outside, the night is quiet the way it always is. Someone's fire settling, a dog somewhere, the temple dark and patient against the sky, waiting for the one evening, whenever it comes, when the sun will finally line up exactly through the western gate, the way my father has been watching for all these years. It hasn't happened yet. It may not happen while I'm still young enough to walk this road with him. I don't mind that the way I thought I might. Somewhere under the floor by the door, a small broken piece of iron sits where no one will ever look for it, holding its small share of weight, doing its quiet work, the same as everything else in this house. It is not a grand life. It is not a famous life, but it is ours, and for now, that is enough.